consistent experience is for all of our LEAs. In December, we will have a conversation about what happens with our LEAs that are experiencing financial challenges and how we continue to provide oversight to those LEAs. So, thanks so much for allowing me the opportunity to share a bit about our critical work, and welcome any questions from our board members here.
Thank you for this, Will. I think I'll open it up for questions and kick off with one of my own, but encourage keeping this deck up. On slide 5, I think it was, you mentioned the role of the LEA's board. I'll let you get back there. We've mentioned this at a number of meetings. The critical role of the governance of an LEA is held by that board, and that board is who holds the charter. So what oversight should PCSB expect from the LEA's board? And what happens if we feel that board is not providing sufficient oversight?
Thanks, Chairperson Cruzy. It's a great question. Am I on the right? I think I'm on the right slide. Yes. So, an LEA's board has the fiduciary duty to ensure that the LEA is properly managed. The board themselves should help an LEA set fiscally responsible financial goals, and have expectations that outline those. The management that they are responsible for overseeing should lead with an ethical perspective right from the beginning, and the board is responsible for that. More granularly, the LEA board should convene finance committee meetings to discuss the finances of a building, and they should use that space and any other space that they identify to interrogate management and finance staff to ensure that the work is being done appropriately and the internal controls are being lived into with fidelity. The board themselves should also engage responsibly with DCPCSB. Certainly, a lot of the work happens between DCPCSB staff and the LEA's staff, but the board should be looped in on those conversations and certainly be responsive in any time there are signs of distress. And then, if an LEA's board, to the final part of your question, if an LEA's board does not provide financial oversight, PCSB would then escalate that communication in writing, hold an effective organization meeting with the LEA's board, and if necessary, escalate our concerns through a notice of concern or a financial correction plan or some other intervention.
I just want to double click on this before we move on. How do we ensure that, because most the day-to-day work is done by staff, how do we know if a board is not providing sufficient oversight? What are the kind of signs of distress, and what do we do? At what point do we elevate?
Mm-hmm. So, and I'll invite Dr. Walker Davis to add any color to this, but I think PCSB works hard to include in our communique a lot of information, even the healthy schools, with schools that are financially healthy. And so we elevate and escalate content to those boards as pretty quickly and early on before things are kind of going south. And so if we are not getting definitive engagement between an LEA's board and our staff directly early on, we are going to reach out more personally. We're not just sending a sterile email to these folks necessarily. And so, yeah, the engagement is strong and early.
Chair Cruzy, I'll just add a little bit to what Will Henderson shared. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge that we had some challenges at the beginning of the meeting with our YouTube streaming live. It is streaming live now, but I also want to remind folks that we do record these meetings, and we'll have the recording of the entire meeting live tomorrow for any portion of it that anyone following did not see. To get to your question about how we ensure that board members are engaged, there are a number of communications that we send to the entire board, particularly as we're looking, as a school is coming upon its review, we would be sending that entire update on the status of the school academically as well as financially prior to that. If it is a school that is in distress, we do have not only communication with the staff, but direct communication with, at a minimum, the school's board chair and treasurer, but usually it is with the entire board where we are copying the board on sort of major escalation communications. And then when we release major things like the financial analysis report, the FAR, and other reports, that is something that is not only going to the executive director and leadership, but to the entire board. And so we are also in examining now if there are other opportunities even earlier in the process to engage board members on the communications. And we recognize it's volunteer boards. They don't need to have every single email communication that we make with staff, but there are critical points in the life cycle that is important that not just the staff and leadership know, but the board is aware as well.
Got it. Thank you for that. I think we've got a number of questions from board members. I'm going to pass to Treasurer Wright next, and after that, Board Member Stanley Beatty, and then I think Vice Chair Salmon after that. So I'll do my best in a virtual setting, keep track of everybody.
Thank you, Chair Kruse. I actually have a follow-up on the Board of Trustees question, and then I have another one too, Will. Going back to what you were saying, Dr. Walker Davis, when we think about the Board of Trustees, I want to actually get a little bit more specific here. Will, what are our expectations of the board when it comes to the annual budget work, right? Like what do we expect boards to do when it comes to reviewing the LEA's budget? And if they ever have to revise their budget, I know that happens a lot of times when enrollment projections aren't there. And we've seen this come in front of us a couple times just over the last few months. So what are our expectations of the board who holds the charter for their review of annual budgets?
Yes, Board Member Wright, it's a great question. So at its core, the budget that PCSB accepts from an LEA is voted upon by the board. And so that vote seems simple, but it infers that there has been a lot of engagement with the LEA. The LEA staff should have presented that budgets in several iterative scenarios. It should be representative of historical, what's happened in LEA's past and the goals and aligned to the goals, the annual goals of the charter school and of, in honoring the goals set out in the charters, in the school's charter. And so when you talk, and then PCSB reviews those budgets and accepts them or asks questions. There are several scenarios when we would require an LEA to resubmit a revised budget or a new budget later in the system. I believe that the first budget, the voted upon budget, is due to us in June, PCSB in June, but we may ask for a revised budget based on significant variance in their enrollment. If an LEA does not meet their enrollment targets, the variance is large, we would ask them to submit a revised budget. So any kind of scenario that substantively, materially may change or suggest a change in an LEA's financial position, they would be asked to revise the budget. And again, that revised budget would go through a vote by the board as well.
Okay, so we should be expecting our boards to, not just that annual budget, but boards should also be staying in contact with their LEA, the leadership, in the event that there is a revised budget, because we look for them to have also approved that too.
Absolutely. And I would expect beyond that, as I mentioned, that a board is standing up a routine finance committee, that certain board members are doing deeper dives in the, financial strategy for the whole organism.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question really also has to do with what's available to the public. At the end of the day, you know, our schools receive public funding to operate. So what information is available to the public, and what is our expectation about how we will engage the community regarding our oversight of these public dollars?
Mhm. Thanks. Another great question. So PCSB takes a lot of that responsibility by transparently sharing this content on our website through our transparency hub. So there's an opportunity through PCSB itself to offer a lot of this content for the general public to have access to. Some of the most important and informative documents that we share on our website are the financial analysis report, the reviews and renewals that are issued every 5 years for an LEA, and as well as LEA's financial statements and their budgets. Um, we publish on our website our scheduled public hearings for our board meetings and invite the public to provide testimony and ask questions if they are interested. So there's a lot of information out there, and we, as you know, LEAs have open board meetings themselves, and they should be discussing the financial health of their organization at those spaces too. So the information is available for the public that chooses to engage.
So just to clarify, what's the DC, what's the transparency hub? Like, what is that? And like, how do I, if I'm in the public, what is it? It's on the website, and then what kind of information? Will I be able to find my school's budget on there, LEA's budget on there? How do I find that?
Yes, so we can share out the specific link to our website here, but it's if you just Google simply DCPCSB's Transparency Hub, it goes directly to a fairly simple to digest site, and one of the line items is financial information, school budgets. It's very straightforward, without a lot of clicks buried within our website. So that, and there's a lot of other information that's not financially related to. There's a lot of content available for the community.
Okay. One of the things I might encourage us to do as a staff is part of our channels or our social media handles that we would, you know, maybe every once in a while just flash that out to the public to remind them that such information is there. We are not trying to hide anything, and that information is indeed transparent and public. So.
And board member Wright, you can the Transparency Hub button is actually on our specific website. So if you don't even want to go to Google and you want to go directly to our normal website, it's right there at the top right. I just checked, and it's very easy to punch the button right there.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
All right, I think board member Beatty, I think, is up next.
Yes, thank you, Chair Cruzy. Will, thank you so much for this presentation. I found it to be very informative, and I am appreciative to you and your team for the work that you all do. Just a few questions, and I'll start with just sort of a point of clarification of something that I would like to highlight. I know we talk a lot about the annual submissions that LEAs do in terms of financial statements and budgets, but you all are also reviewing quarterly statements, correct? Even though they're unaudited, I understand that, but at a minimum, you're looking at all LEAs at least on a quarterly basis in terms of financials. And then you go to an annual tenor. And like you said, this is where financial health is fine and stable. Obviously, when there start to be some challenges, you would increase that tenor. But on a normal basis, you're looking at all LEAs at least quarterly.
At the very minimum, we are looking at LEA's financial statistics information quarterly. That's exactly right.
My next question is actually on this same slide. So could you, Will, talk about the juxtaposition between the role of PCSB ensuring LEAs are properly managed versus their board of trustees ensuring proper management? I'm sure those two managements are different. Just talk us through the juxtaposition.
Sure. So, well, I I've talked a lot about PCSB's
Sure.
properly management, so that's that. The proper management that we're referencing that an LEA's board would be responsible for is they're setting the policy, the financial policy for the organization. They should understand that, help write it, or help approve it routinely, if not annually, certainly frequently. They are responsible for knowing the internal controls. As you can imagine, we are not looking for every single set of internal controls for all 68 of our LEAs. However, I would expect that a board of trustees of an LEA most certainly is. They should know, what are the ways to ensure that, anything negative is protected, the agency is protected from that. So they should be a full step closer to the work, and most LEAs have some sort of threshold where certain payments can't be made or contracts can't be entered into without the explicit or even signed approval from their board or their board chair. So they can design or influence those specific policies from one LEA to the next, but they should have sets of policies that do that. That's not as close into the day-to-day dollar, expense that an LEA leader may engage with, but they should be ensuring that there's a strong policy in place and they have systems to check to ensure that the policy is working itself.
Perfect. And then just two more questions, Will. On slide 9, if we could go there, there is a bullet. Yes, here. There's a bullet, third down from the bottom, facility leases maintained maintained in Hub. I had all of my squares on top of it. So when you say LEAs also validate facility leases, just talk a little bit about that, because that's information that they would submit to PCSB, but then what are we doing with it?
Yes, so thanks, Board Member Stanley Beatty. That is the lease agreements that these LEAs have with the spaces where they hold their school. And so we use that information, we review them ourselves, and we compare that to that quarterly work that we do and make sure that those leases make sense and make sure that the lease agreements, the longevity of those leases are articulated accurately in the quarterly financials, which are unaudited, as we've discussed. And so that's helping us pressure test to make sure that there isn't significant error or variance that could create like cover intentionally or unintentionally financial distress measure that we might want to look into. So we look closely at that information because that's often a very large line item in an LEA's budget, and so we keep close tabs on that.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up. It's often the largest expense for any organization is the way it houses itself. So I was glad to see that we called that out in terms of not only them giving us the information and validating it, but also that we're reviewing it and, like you said, pressure testing it, and also taking it into consideration whenever we're talking about financial health and assessing risk. And then I just had one other question on slide 14. Where you talk about the targets. Yes, yes, where you talk about the targets and you sort of differentiate them on a time factor. Can you talk about how we set the minimum targets or minimum thresholds for LEAs to be measured by? How do we set those targets?
So it's important to note, as many of us do, that no specific metric in and of itself paints the full picture of what's happening at an organization. So these metrics are taken together with historic trends and help us with that comprehensive look at the school that I mentioned earlier. So We continuously try to improve and refine the selection of metrics over time. And we look at the weights and the floors and the targets that most accurately and reliably inform our reviews and analysis when predicting financial issues that range from insolvency to extra funds to rather than investing them into education. And so, the sector itself and the history of the charters here in DC help us inform those targets in many ways, and we continue to scrutinize them as we go. So from time to time, we might review and assess those metrics. And though any changes that we might make are going to be connected to recent and trending information in the economy or in the forecasts of our LEAs. And certainly we take seriously the other authorizers and the data collection that our colleagues outside of, or authorizing colleagues outside of DC collect as we think about this as well. So as you can imagine, it's complicated and we take it very seriously and look at it routinely.
And can it change, Will? Can your targets change? I mean, obviously, like you said, you're looking at it on a regular basis. You're comparing it to what other people are doing across the country, other authorizers. Can we change it? Do we change it? How often might we change it?
Can we? Yes. Do we? Only never lightly. And how often? I'm not sure. I can find this most recent time we've made some changes. I don't have that right off the top of my head. But it's not often. It is the targets we've set so far in the last couple of decades seem to serve us and helping us understand the health of our LEAs in many, many ways. And so, but can we? Yes, absolutely. If they are not serving us.
And Board Member Stanley Beatty, we certainly would not change them within a budget cycle. We
Right,
certainly
right.
would not
Yeah.
do that midstream. And I would say where there might be more scrutiny and changes along the way is certainly for a school that might be under a financial corrective action plan. They will have a specific set of metrics that may be more aggressive than these here. But as Will said, we're looking over time and we're looking at trends and having that in relationship to the larger sector and national trends. So it is, certainly in my 4 years that I have been here, we have not significantly changed any of the metrics that we're operating with now, but certainly if there is a movement in any particular direction, it is worth revisiting. And as Will said, they are constantly looking at how these relate, how they interplay with each other too.
Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned in December, we're going to talk about what a target might be for an LEA that's in distress. That's not what we're talking about here. And this is by no means, this is all in service of healthy education institutions in our sector. And so this content is transparent. These are targets that our LEAs know about. If we were to change something, they would hear about it first, or maybe not first, but they would hear about it before they start spending that money. And so they know how they should be building and balancing their budgets.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you for that. I think Vice Chair Sandman, I think you're next.
Thank you, Leah. Will, thank you for your presentation. I have 4 questions. First, how does the DC Public Charter School Board ensure that the board of a local educational agency, an LEA, I'm going to refer to them as the board of the charter school, that they have the skill set and the expertise to exercise meaningful oversight of the finances of the school? What prompts my question is I've served on a number of nonprofit boards, and people are on nonprofit boards for a lot of different reasons. In the case of the board of a charter school, you're going to have parent representation, you may have community representation, you may have some people who are educators. The number of people who actually have financial oversight experience may be quite limited. And there's a risk on a nonprofit board that members who don't have personal experience and expertise in reviewing financial matters will automatically defer to management. to the leaders of the school, to the chief financial officer, to the chief executive officer, and just be inclined, understandably, to rubber stamp whatever it is that they say. Is there any process for ensuring that board members are trained, that they're educated about what their fiscal oversight obligations are, and assisted in developing the skills to exercise those responsibilities appropriately?
Thanks, Councilmember Sandman. It's a great question, and it's about our governance work. And I think Dr. Walker Davis may want to share a little bit more about the governance work that you're speaking to.
Yeah, so I will say a couple of things. You asked the question, Board Member Sandman, about ensure. So short of us selecting that board member on the team, we can't ensure, but there are a few things that we do to make sure that there is at least communication about what the expectations are. So some of it is coming out in this discussion as well, but we do partner with the DC Alliance. We partner with formerly Education Board Partners, now Education Board Partners at Bellwether, to convey what we believe are our expectations around financial oversight, so that when they have their governance academies and they are helping to recruit and place board members on boards, that they understand what our expectations are. It is also in the guidance and communication that we send to LEAs about what we expect for budget submissions, that having to be approved by their board. When we send communications about the financial health of the school preceding a review, or if we have to send communication to schools and invite board members to be part of conversations about risks and challenges that we see. And so we try to be very transparent about the health of the school for the board, so that the board is aware of their expectations. And I will say that this is an area that I think we could also get better at, maybe specific and targeted communication to what are volunteer board members, right? We have been exploring the extent to which we can tailor some of our communication to those board members, because really we are putting together standard messaging for the LEA. And I do think that is an area where we could get better at doing that, and partnering with others who are also supporting school leaders. But we do, as I mentioned earlier, communicate to the LEA, and there is a way to ensure that that communication is landing with the level of urgency and severity that it needs to with the folks who hold the charter for the school. So Will and the team and I are looking at ways to enhance those communication channels.
Thank you. Is there any requirement that an LEA, that a charter school, have a conflict of interest policy?
Do you want that?
Yep, great question. Board member Sandman, apparently I promoted you a little bit ago. I saw
That's okay, Will.
I saw Dr. Walker Davis laugh, and I was kind of what was going on.
You can call me council member, that's fine.
Okay, great. But in short, the answer is yes. LEAs are required to have a conflict of interest policy that is something that information that we collect as well. So absolutely.
Do you collect information on compliance with the policy? For example, board members' annual certification that they have received a copy of the policy and have disclosed any conflicts?
Yes, we do. And I can get, we have a whole list of compliance checks that schools are supposed to submit annually. And I will confirm what exactly regarding finances is in that, but there are a number of items that they need to certify that they have done amongst their leadership and governance team. And speaking of governance, I neglected to share that we have also increased our capacity on our staff for governance oversight. And one of the things that that staff member will be responsible for doing is some of what you mentioned, Board Member Sandman reaching out to schools, making sure that they are aware of all of their compliance obligations, making sure that we have a full understanding of whether they are in compliance with their board composition, if the extent to which there are vacancies and all of that. And so I'm pretty excited that we have some additional capacity to support us here internally, in addition to continuing to partner with our, other education support agencies.
Is there any process for reviewing the credentials and qualifications of the certified public accounting firms that do the annual audits?
Thanks. So yes, definitely. We review this list and their corresponding certifications and these independent auditors annually. And we have a group that's not just made up of DCPCSB. The Office of the CFO is a part of that organization that supports us in determining who are approved auditors that our LEAs are allowed to employ to do the annual audit work.
Okay, thank you. My last question, could you go back to slide 4, please?
Is this the right one?
That's the right one. How have DC laws relating to financial matters of local educational agencies changed in the past few years? Are there new and different requirements?
Yes, so there are certainly a handful of new requirements that have happened in recent years. In 2021, DC Gov enacted the Budget Support and School Financial Transparency Amendment Acts that require LEAs and DCPCSB to report their budgets and actual expenditures annually. And those reports include at-risk reports.
Can I stop you? What's an at-risk report?
Yeah, so an at-risk report is it speaks to the amount of at-risk funding an LEA receives, and clarifies and ensures that that at-risk funding is spent on serving students that are considered at risk. If you may remember that in our UPSFF, the per pupil funding that an LEA gets, they get just a general amount of money for an individual child or student. But then an LEA may be eligible to receive additional funding based on specific needs of a student. And so, the most familiar one with many of our families might be the special education distinction, so that the LEA has access to resources to ensure that they can provide those additional services that are so critical to a student's learning experience. At risk is another example of those. Of one of those distinctions that the money would follow that student. At risk has a specific definition for what an at-risk student is, but you can certainly.
I just wanted to clarify that in this context, at risk refers to a population of students. It doesn't refer to financial risk.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Great clarification.
And just on the common financial reporting, obviously we had previously collected annual budgets from schools and reported that in our Transparency Hub. This is a requirement that this is published in a specific way through the Common Financial Reporting Standards, and that is really the major change that happened within the last few years.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair Salmon. Board Member Davis, you're up next.
Good evening, everyone. Will, thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions. And the first question is really a result of Vice Chairman Sandman's comments. I agree wholeheartedly that there is a tendency for board members to kind of defer to individuals with greater expertise. I also have noticed that there's a tendency for some board members to de-skill themselves. And what I mean by that is um, most board members have a certain set of skills that they bring to the board, right? That is of value. However, when you have other individuals who are experts in a particular area, they tend to turn off their intuition, right? And so my first question is basically, you know, if there is a board member on a board and their intuition is telling them, hey, something's not doesn't sound quite right with these numbers, how do they reach out to get help, right? Instead of like, causing confusion, like what resources are available for that particular board member to seek help and guidance to help get understanding for the entire board? I hope my question is making sense.
Yes, Board Member Davis, it's a great question. So I think I think of it as twofold. And as you know, I was a leader in an LEA for a long time and had a lot of engagement with very you know with board members that had a lot of diverse perspectives. And so if your first question is, what should a board member do if something is telling them that there is more information to be understood? And I would say to you, Board Member Davis, and to any board member of an LEA, is that your job is to ask that question. Your job is to understand. You don't need the treasurer to understand every line item and depend on the treasurer to understand all of that. You're on the hook for that and supporting the strategy and the engagement with these taxpayer funds that are here to serve the great children and students of DC. And so you deserve to know as a board member, and you should know, and you should understand. And if you come to the table with a different expertise, a colleague will rely on you to share your expertise with them in the same way you should rely on your colleagues to gather that learning yourself. I would say another critical to answer your second question of what resources are out there. There's several organizations that I'm sure we could point more specifically to a growing board member that wants to know more here that are available here in the city. But I would also encourage board members to connect with other board members of other LEAs. There is a wide plethora of engaged board members that have a diverse set of skills and content knowledge. And I think that a board member of an LEA is only going to benefit from learning more from their colleagues at other LEAs. As we've said in several different ways tonight, the nuances are great within the diverse portfolio of LEAs that we serve, and those nuances I think are very helpful in the collegiality around the city and the sector for growing and learning. Dr. Walker Davis, did you want to add more?
The only thing that I would add to that is, in addition to the specific support organizations that do this work, I want to make it clear that if a board member has a specific question about the data related to their school, contact us if you feel like you're not getting that the answer that you need. So certainly for the finances, contact the school finance team. If it's an academic question, contact our team. And this is why I said earlier that we want to make sure that those communications, particularly as they start to get elevated, are not just going to the school leader. I should note that I've already told LEA leaders that this is the direction that we're heading in. And this is not to, step over the LEA leaders, but I do think it is much better when the entire school leadership is aware of the health of the school, so that the boards can be supportive of the LEA's leader in that work. And I think, as many people who are aware of the challenges and can bring the diverse perspectives to the solutions, the better. And so directly, Board Member Davis, if there is a specific question about a school's data that they feel they either don't understand or want more time, please feel free to contact us.
Thank you, team. And my second question, Will, if you don't mind shifting to slide 12, please. And on slide 12, you talked about the check-ins that take place between the finance team and the schools. And my wondering is if you can provide some examples of the types of questions that, that are asked. And if you have a school that is maybe hitting the minimum target or didn't hit the target, what types of questions are being asked of the schools and the school leadership?
Yeah, thanks, Board Member Davis. It's a great question. Um, Certainly, as your question infers, all of the questions that we're asking LEAs are very personalized to the financial situation of what's happening there. So, um, most importantly, our aim with any ad hoc set of questions we might be asking is to obtain meaningful financial information that will help us identify and clarify and fully grasp what is actually occurring at the given LEA and in terms of how they're serving their students. And so by all means, we work to alleviate the burden of reporting for an LEA by getting as much content right from the jump. But it does turn into, as we gather information, there's a lot of of all these metrics that we want to know more about. So some examples of questions that we might ask is we might dig in on a variance from one year to the next, or as Board Member Stanley Beatty highlighted about the quarterly connection. If a variance happens from one quarter to the next, even though those financials are unaudited, we might ask for clarity on what caused a significant variance in the line items that they're identifying. We might dig in more uh, deeply if the answer to the variance was caused by this one-time thing. We might ask for more depth for what is the value of that one-time occurrence, that one-time expense, and what is their assurances that that expense will not happen again and again. We might ask about, as you can imagine, a budget in and of itself is a draft document. It's a forecast. It's a set of expectations that they're planning on. But what happens day to day in the school might impact their priorities over the course of the year. And so we would expect an LEA to keep us posted on that kind of information. And so if their programmatic initiatives are evolving or changing within a year or from one year to the next, we might ask a school to go deeper about the sustainability of various programs, adding programs or removing programs. Um, and certainly, if there are challenges, even as you mentioned, that some of these additional questions are going to come before a school misses a target, right? And so we still might ask for clarity from an LEA about what their steps are to mitigate the impact of their changing situation. And so that those are the types of questions that we might ask. And of course, you can just infer that same type of question. When you move around the financial report of an LEA.
Thank you, Will.
Well, I think we have a couple more. Shakura, board member, or excuse me, Secretary Shakura Adamafanian, do you have a question?
Thank you. I do. Will, thank you again. I'll echo the sentiment of the rest of the board. Really well done presentation. If we can go back to slide 15, please. There we go. Excellent.
Pink one, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. If you could just kind of give us some insight into which stakeholder inputs are most important in PCSB's sort of financial oversight and why?
Which are most important? Well, these four squares on this screen are the most important. Yeah, I mean, Board Member Adamafanian, all of these, we couldn't do the meaningful work that we do without any of these inputs. the enrollment projections that we do in collaboration with the DME, the Deputy Mayor's of Education's office. That helps us chart what's happening in the city at large. And if, all of our schools, had dramatic increases or drops in their enrollment that's not aligned with the projections of the city, that causes red flags for us. And so we're going to engage with them and with sometimes with our LEAs about what's happening there that has real consequences in our city. Um, this board's finance committee, the quarterly conversations that we have here really guide the work and the oversight that we do, and it creates an opportunity for us to ensure that you all have a strong pulse on not only all of our schools, but in particular with a spotlight on our schools that do show metrics of distress, sometimes severe and sometimes not severe, but as an opportunity to share that with this board and offer this board the opportunity to interrogate and to leverage their influence and knowledge as we move through this. So, and certainly, as you can imagine, the OSSI's work, the common financial reporting work, helps us have comparisons not just within our sector but outside of our sector. And the Auditor Review Committee, again, it's led by PCSB staff, but it has influences within from external folks, the OCFO most notably, so that there's a meaningful stamp of approval on auditors that can do the work with a high ethical and detailed standards. So I can't narrow it down further than these four, and there certainly are others that are influential beyond these four.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this. I'm really glad that we're taking the time to do this presentation. I'm grateful to everybody's thoughtful participation, and asking all these questions is incredibly important. It is clear that there is accountability, and that this is that your piece about there's no one element, there's no one metric. We have to look at this comprehensively, just as we do in the academics. So I look forward to the December presentation.
Yep.
Okay, Jonah, before we move on to the next part of the meeting, has the public commenter showed back up in the attendee pool?
Let me take a quick look. Give me half a second.
Yes.
Josh has not arrived yet.
Okay. Well, that individual has had ample time to join, so we are going to move forward. Board members, may I please have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I move to approve the November 18th, 2024 board meeting agenda.
I second.
Thank you. Secretary Adamafanian, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes. Chairwoman Cruzy,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman,
Aye.
Treasurer Wright,
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty,
Aye.
Board Member Davis,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez by proxy is an aye, and I am an aye as well.
Great. Thank you very much. We have a quorum. Next on our agenda this evening is the election of board officers. Before we begin, I'll take a moment to remind everyone how this process works. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, every member of this board is appointed by the mayor and is approved by the DC City Council. We each serve a 4-year term and then can be reappointed for one additional 4-year term. Separate from that appointment process, the board usually votes to elect officers from among its members who will serve in that role for the following year. The officer positions are chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. I will now open the floor for officer nominations, and actually will indulge in offering a nomination myself. I would like to nominate for chair Chantel Wright, for vice chair Jim Sandman, for Secretary, Shakura Adamafanian, and for Treasurer, Carissa Stanley Beatty. Are there any other nominations for any officer position? Hearing none, we will now take a roll call vote. Again, the nominations are for the chair role, Chantel Wright, for vice chair, Jim Sandman, for secretary, Shakura Adamafanian, and for treasurer, Carissa Stanley Beatty. Secretary Adamafanian, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes. Chairwoman Cruzy,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman,
I abstain from the vote on myself, but vote aye otherwise.
very good. Treasurer Wright,
I abstain from the vote of myself, but otherwise vote yay. Yes.
I see how this is gonna go. Very good. Board Member Stanley Beatty,
I abstain from the vote of myself, but vote aye to everyone else.
Board Member Davis,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez by proxy is an aye. I abstain. So not for me, but for everyone else is an aye. Chairwoman Cruzy, I think you know what I said.
I think we've got majority votes with the right number, the sufficient number of ayes. So thank you, Secretary Adamafanian. Thank you to each of you. And we will move forward. Next, we will vote on the consent calendar. Would any board member like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or state a recusal for the record? Okay, colleagues, I will now entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
I second.
Let the record show multiple people felt good about that one. Secretary Adamafanian, would you please take a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Chairwoman Cruzy,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman,
Aye.
Treasurer Wright,
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty,
Aye.
Board Member Davis,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez by proxy is an aye, and I am an aye as well.
Excellent. Is there any new business? Seeing none, colleagues, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the November 18th, 2024 board meeting.
I'll second.
I was gonna say, no one wants to second the adjournment.
It's a good time today.
All right, thank you. One last time.
Chairwoman Cruzy,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman,
Aye.
Treasurer Wright,
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty,
Aye.
Board Member Davis,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez is an aye by proxy, and I am an aye.
All right, good night, everybody. Thank you again, Will.
Good night. Yes, thank you,
Thank you.
Will.
Good night, everyone.
Jonah.
Good night.